Hey guys, tonight we're heading into the vast, sun-baked world of ancient Persia. Not for war, not for empire building, but for a picnic. Yep, a real one. You're standing barefoot on hot gravel, the smell of rose water in the air, watching a crew of linen-clad servants unfold what appears to be half the Silk Road's carpet inventory. There's laughter ahead, distant music, and the unmistakable thump of someone dropping a watermelon that was clearly not meant to be dropped. And you've been invited, or more accurately, swept up into this imperial leisure operation, which is already somehow both very organized and completely chaotic. Just a heads up, you probably won't survive this picnic. Not because it's dangerous, unless you count heat stroke or grape leaf overload, but because you'll be too bewildered by how elaborate it all is. Seriously, someone brought a gold-plated stool just for a parrot. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing how far this sleepy little caravan travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through pale dust as the first mat is unrolled. A tapestry longer than your apartment and more detailed than your last relationship. It stretches out across the desert floor like someone's unfurled a royal banquet scene from a very expensive children's book. Blue threads shimmer like water. Golden embroidery glints in the early sun. You resist the urge to ask if shoes are allowed. Spoiler, they're not. Persian picnics are sacred business, and dusty sandals are not invited. The royal household is already in motion. Dozens of servants fan out, unfurling more rugs, weighing down their corners with brass kettles, marble jars, and baskets of suspiciously plump apricots. Children in velvet tunics giggle and vanish beneath parasols shaped like lotus blossoms. There's a faint scent of jasmine and... roasted nuts? Yes, someone is roasting pistachios. Of course they are. Historians still argue whether these royal picnics were strictly ceremonial or if they doubled as informal court strategy sessions. Personally, you're just trying not to trip on a tassel as you're led toward the guest section. It's, get this, divided by social rank, indicated by the thread count of the rug beneath your feet. You're somewhere between minor diplomat and guy who refills the fig bowl. The first main fact you notice, ancient Persians loved their gardens, but they didn't stop at planting them. When they picnicked, they tried to recreate paradise wherever they went. Paradise, by the way, comes from the Old Persian word paradisa, meaning enclosed garden. Makes sense, considering someone just set up a miniature water fountain in the middle of this picnic rug. The water burbles politely, as if even it knows not to interrupt. A gentle breeze picks up. Your guide, a suspiciously enthusiastic man named Dariush, hands you a linen napkin embroidered with cypress trees. You're not sure what to do with it, so you nod solemnly, which seems to satisfy him. Somewhere nearby, someone plays a short melody on a santur, a kind of hammered dulcimer. It sounds like sunlight dripping down a silk curtain. You plop down, carefully, because the rug costs more than your life, and feel the texture of tightly woven wool beneath your fingers. It's soft but firm, a perfect surface for what is clearly about to become a food explosion. But we're not there yet. First, the presentation must be flawless. Quirky tidbit, one of the most prized possessions at Persian picnics wasn't food, it was ice. Yes, in a desert, ice. Wealthy Persian families stored winter snow in underground chambers called yakchals, insulating it with thick walls and desert science wizardry. And when it came time to impress, oh, you better believe they showed up to the picnic with chilled rose sherbet in stone goblets. Meanwhile, your personal water bottle back home is still warm after 4 hours. A camel lets out a disgruntled bellow nearby, reminding everyone that the imperial ice was hauled here on its back. You consider offering it a slice of your gratitude, or maybe one of the dates in that ornate silver bowl no one is touching yet. Dariush leans in to whisper conspiratorially, "The king once made a man carry a plum the entire day, just because it matched the color of his robe." You look at the plum. You look at Dariush. He's not joking. As the day begins to stretch, so does the picnic. More guests arrive. More rugs appear, seamlessly connected like puzzle pieces in a dream. A tent is raised at the far end, purely decorative, and someone starts drawing an actual border around the picnic area using crushed flower petals. You realize this isn't a casual gathering. This is Imperial theater disguised as lunch. Every placement, every pillow, every item is part of a visual narrative. Look how vast we are. Look how refined. Also, we brought 300 walnuts, just in case. The only thing more overwhelming than the scale is the silence. No shouting, no jostling. Just gentle murmurs, the clink of brass, and the occasional camel complaint. Even the servants move with eerie coordination, as if they rehearsed. Which they probably did. Persian kings were famous for their showmanship, and these picnics served as subtle and not so subtle demonstrations of status, unity, and culinary swagger. You shift slightly, catching sight of a towering tamarisk tree in the distance, its branches swaying lazily. Beneath it, a shadowy figure reclines with what might be a scroll or a menu. Same difference, really. And as the sun rises a little higher, casting gold across the endless textiles and smiling guests, you realize something quietly magical. You've only just begun. You haven't moved for a solid 15 minutes now, partly because the cushion you're on has convinced your spine it's been living wrong this whole time, and partly because something enchanting has started bubbling from a nearby copper vessel. The smell is faintly floral, faintly spicy, and somehow makes you feel like your pores just got cleaner. The tamarisk tree, your shady sentinel from earlier, now looms directly above you, its long, feathery branches swaying like slow underwater seaweed. Beneath it, servants begin assembling what can only be described as the hydration wing of this operation. Welcome to the Persian picnic's surprisingly intense beverage ritual. Out come the samovars, cylindrical copper contraptions that look like decorative missiles but are actually ancient drink warmers. Steam hisses gently from their vents. Several guests shift instinctively, like they've just been reminded that tea is not optional, it is destiny. Dariush appears again, this time holding a silver tray, like he's auditioning for the role of man most likely to trip and still not spill anything. He offers you a goblet. It's warm, not hot, not lukewarm, warm, like it knows exactly how your hands feel right now and wants to help. You take a sip. It's not tea. It's something. Maybe rose water, maybe cinnamon, maybe liquid nostalgia for a childhood you didn't actually have. The texture is smooth, the scent strangely familiar. You glance up. Dariush grins. "Spiced tamarind tonic," he whispers, "with fig sap and saffron." Of course, because heaven forbid you hydrate with something boring like water. Historians still argue whether this kind of elaborate drink service was purely for the elite or if lower classes shared similar beverage rituals. What's clear, however, is that Persians took their liquids seriously, sometimes even more than their solids. In fact, records from the Achaemenid period suggest the imperial treasury allocated specific funds for drinks only, separate from the food budget. You pause, trying to imagine Congress debating a national grape syrup reserve. Then again, maybe not the worst idea. A scribe nearby is writing something by candlelight. Yes, in daylight. And yes, it's mostly for flair. You sneak a peek. It's a list of drink options. Over 20 entries, ranging from pomegranate elixirs to yogurt and herb smoothies called Doog. Apparently, the great king once had his own private citrus curator. The man's entire job was to inspect, polish, and lovingly pack lemons. For the record, you've never respected a job title more. A girl, no older than 9, walks past carrying a tray of Golab, rosewater, and tiny bundles of mint wrapped in silk. She looks like a sentient tea commercial. You wave. You wave. She waves back, drops a mint bundle in your lap, and vanishes before you can ask if she's real. Then, without warning, a very old man appears next to the samovar and begins reciting something in rhythmic Old Persian. You don't understand a word, but everyone hushes. Turns out this is the beverage blessing, a mix of Zoroastrian invocation and polite encouragement to please don't spill this on the rugs. The crowd chuckles. You do too, even though you're still holding your cup like it might explode. Quirky tidbit, the Persians invented a kind of protothermos centuries before the modern world. These early beverage containers, often ceramic or bronze, were double-walled, sealed with wax or pitch, and sometimes lined with soft felt or even hair. Yes, human or goat. Hydration came at the cost of, intimacy. You take another sip of the tamarind potion and notice how everyone else is now holding matching goblets. It's all choreographed, you realize. Every movement, every dish, every moment. Persian leisure is a performance, and everyone's in costume, even you. Granted, your tunic doesn't quite match and you're still wearing socks, a major faux pas, but no one seems to mind. The sound of small bells jingling draws your attention. A pair of young boys enters, balancing a pole between them, from which hang two gourd-shaped drink coolers. They're headed for the Noble Uncles section, a group of men who appear to be doing absolutely nothing and yet project intense judgment with their eyebrows alone. Dariush reappears. Honestly, how does he move so silently? And plops down beside you with a sigh. They're pouring rose sherbet for the left-handed nobles, he murmurs. You blink. That's specific. Yes, they believe the left hand is the one the wind prefers. You nod slowly, unsure whether this is poetry or pseudoscience. Either way, you now kind of want to switch hands. A slow rhythm begins to build, somewhere between a heartbeat and a lullaby. You glance over. Musicians are tapping goblets gently with silver spoons, syncing the sound with the slosh of drink being poured. It's oddly hypnotic. You feel your eyelids droop. That might be the saffron talking. More guests drift in, some on horseback, some carried in covered litters. A pair of philosophers argue politely over whether dreams should be served before or after the aperitifs. A matron in teal silks corrects them both with a well-timed glare. Historians still debate whether the elaborate Persian beverage customs evolved independently or were influenced by earlier Mesopotamian libation rituals. There's evidence of shared techniques: cooling vessels, perfumed water, ceremonial cups, but the Persians took it to aesthetic extremes. You're now sipping from a chalice shaped like a bird. A very judgmental bird. The sun climbs higher, shadows shorten. A few guests tip over gracefully into nap mode. No shame here. Post-beverage naps are encouraged. A servant passes by with a basket of miniature fans made from woven reeds. You accept one, partly for the breeze, partly because everyone else seems to be fanning with practiced rhythm. You try to match it. Fail. Try again. Give up and use it to shoo away an insect that looks like it wants to unionize. A subtle gong chimes in the distance, signaling the transition to phase 2, appetizers. You take one last sip. The cup is refilled before you can even blink. And as the samovars continue their slow hiss, steam curling into the sapphire sky, you settle deeper into your embroidered throne of woven cloud. You are hydrated. You are perfumed. You are, frankly, more relaxed than you've ever been on a weekday. And this picnic has only just begun. The sun's now hanging just a little higher, casting honey-colored rays across the silk-draped seating areas, and your stomach makes a polite but undeniable suggestion. Perhaps it's time for a snack. As if on cue, because of course everything here runs on spooky good timing, someone jingles a bell, and from the far end of the grove comes what looks like a very elegant, very slow-moving centipede. But no, wait, it's a procession. 10 servers in identical robes, each balancing a single lacquered tray, walk in perfect step. No clumsy elbows, no wobbling bowls, just synchronized snack ballet, Persian style. The first tray arrives before you, thin sheets of something golden and slightly translucent, folded like love letters. You pick one up. It flutters in your fingers like edible silk. You take a bite. It's apricot leather, sun-dried fruit puree, rolled thin and dusted with rose sugar. It tastes like childhood, even though you never had one, quite this poetic. To your right, a pair of twins begin a competitive eating contest with dried figs. To your left, an elderly woman critiques a pomegranate with the intensity of a Michelin inspector. The vibe is blissfully focused. Appetizers in ancient Persia weren't just pre-meal filler, they were a statement. In fact, archaeological digs in places like Pasargadae have uncovered ceramic molds specifically designed for presentation. Intricate little leaf patterns and animal shapes meant to hold soft cheeses, date pastes, or spiced nuts. That's right, these people had custom-designed hummus bowls before forks were even trendy. You reach for a little bowl of something green and mysterious. A whisper of garlic hits your nose. It's sabzi cordon, a platter of fresh herbs like tarragon, mint, cilantro, and basil, meant to be eaten straight up, like a bunny with excellent taste. You try a few sprigs. Suddenly, your mouth is both cool and zingy, as if it got a motivational speech. Historians still argue whether this herb ritual had symbolic meaning or was simply a flex of freshness. Some say it was medicinal, Others think it was a subtle way to advertise your garden game. Either way, chewing herbs and nodding thoughtfully has become your new favorite persona. Then comes the bread. Oh, the bread. Flat, warm, and lightly blistered from the clay oven, it arrives tucked under embroidered cloths to keep it soft. Baked on a bed of hot river stones. You bite into a corner. It crackles delicately, then melts into chewy warmth. Somehow both rustic and regal. You're not crying, it's just the steam, probably. Quirky tidbit. The Persian Empire once had state-assigned bakers whose sole job was to provide bread to the royal messengers. These poor souls baked at odd hours and often used portable fire pans so the couriers could have warm bread mid-journey. Imagine being an ancient Uber Eats driver with better posture. Meanwhile, nearby guests dip their bread into everything from herbed yogurt to stewed lentils. You follow their lead and discover something creamy and golden, garnished with rose petals. It's kashke badamjan, a warm eggplant dish made with whey, garlic, and caramelized onions. And it tastes like the food equivalent of a long, approving hug. Suddenly, a lute begins to play, a slow, wandering melody that makes your brain sigh. A teenage boy sings softly about a bird who refused to fly until it found the juiciest plum. People laugh quietly at the punchline. You don't get it, but you clap anyway. Under another tree, a group of children are having what appears to be a pomegranate peeling speed contest. Juice flies. Laughter follows. One child triumphantly displays a perfect unbroken peel spiral and is awarded a whole walnut. No one questions the logic. You glance up and catch a group of nobles exchanging little porcelain spoons. At first you think it's a weird game, but no, they're tasting each other's spice blends, like adults with too many hobbies. One of them hands you a tiny spoon and raises an eyebrow. You taste it. Coriander, lime zest, and something oddly floral. Lavender, maybe? You nod in reverence. He bows in return. This is what respect looks like here. More trays arrive, and now it's a parade of pickles. Seriously. Carrots, garlic, olives, even watermelon rind. Each one soaking in vinegar spiced with cumin or fenugreek. You try a pickled plum and your mouth does a somersault. Not unpleasant, just dramatic. As the servers glide away, you realize no two guests are eating quite the same things. There's variety not just in ingredients, but in order, in style, in pacing. It's like everyone here got a personalized snack itinerary. And speaking of pacing, nobody's in a rush. In fact, you watch an elderly man take a full 5 minutes just to butter a slice of bread. Slowly, deliberately, as if he's making peace with it first. You respect that energy. One particularly animated guest waves you over to try something called maraba. It's a jam, fig, you think, spiked with cardamom and orange blossom. You're given a toothpick to scoop it. It feels wrong, but also right. The flavors bloom like a slow-motion firework. Somewhere in the distance, a flute begins to mimic the song of a desert bird, and for a moment you forget this is a picnic. It feels more like a sacred rite disguised as a snack break. Historians still debate whether Persian picnics followed a standardized menu, or whether variety was the point. Some ancient texts reference feast guides, while others imply the goal was never repetition. Either way, your palate is now dizzy and vaguely weepy. And just when you think this appetizer parade might be over, Dariush returns, holding a small golden cage. Inside? Not a bird. A cheese. Yes, really. Soft, round, flecked with green herbs, it's been gently smoked over walnut bark. The lid is lifted. The aroma escapes. Several nearby guests sigh in what can only be described as dairy-induced euphoria. You try a sliver. It's tangy, earthy, and just a little smug. You lean back. The flute's still singing. The breeze is doing that thing again where it flutters your sleeve like it's composing haiku. You are no longer eating. You are picnicking. Spiritually. And the main course hasn't even started yet. You barely have time to digest the floral jam and smoked cheese, both emotionally and gastrointestinally, before a subtle, savory breeze begins to weave its way through the air. Heads lift, nostrils flare. There's a shift in the atmosphere, like when the orchestra tunes up before the main act. The main course is coming. Out from behind a veil of cypress trees, an entourage of servers appears, this time wielding not trays but polished brass platters, each one so wide it requires 2 people to carry. The platters glint in the afternoon sun like giant gold coins stacked with treasure. As they approach, the scents become clearer: coriander, cinnamon, roasted garlic, dried lime, and yes, that's saffron. Of course it is. You could scent map your way to this meal with your eyes closed and still arrive smiling. The first dish is unveiled with the drama of a magician revealing a dove. It's chaloup, the pride of Persian grilling. Skewers of marinated lamb, so tender they look like they gave up resistance long before the fire kissed them. Next to them, mounds of fluffy white rice, each grain distinct, glistening with butter and strewn with barberries and slivered pistachios. You scoop some onto your plate. The rice is fragrant, lightly sour from the berries, warm and nutty from the ghee. A sprinkle of sumac adds a citrusy pop that nearly makes your toes curl. One of your fellow picnickers, an older woman with 6 silver rings and a voice like velvet sandpaper, insists you try the tadig, the prized golden crust from the bottom of the rice pot. She breaks you off a jagged piece and hands it over like a relic. You crunch into it. It is, quite frankly, divine. If angels made chips, this would be them. Quirky tidbit: Persian royal chefs were once trained to calculate cooking times by scent. A good cook could tell when the tahdig was perfectly crisped just by sniffing the air. Burning it was a social crime, akin to misquoting the Shah in public. Next comes a dish called fesenjan, a thick dark stew of ground walnuts and pomegranate molasses served over chicken or duck. It looks like chocolate lava but tastes like a rich, slightly tart dream. You're warned, it may stain your fingers forever. You eat it anyway. Historians still argue whether this particular dish originated in the western provinces or was adapted from even earlier Elamite recipes. Some scrolls mention walnut-based sauces dating back over 1,000 years, but with slightly different proportions. You, for one, would like to time travel and thank whoever had the audacity to simmer poultry in syrup and nuts. A server passes by with what looks like a tiny flaming hill. It's shirin polo, sweet rice layered with candied orange peel, raisins, almonds, and saffron. The edges are slightly caramelized, giving each bite a crispy sweet kick. It tastes like what you imagine royal birthday cake would be if birthdays had been invented yet. You take a breath, lean back, and let your senses float a little. Nearby, a man with a mustache so grand it deserves its own carriage is composing a short poem to the kebab. He finishes, bows to his plate, and eats in silence. Across from you, someone peels a quail egg with the precision of a surgeon. Another guest ladles gourmet sabzi, a green stew of herbs and kidney beans, into a bowl with all the gravitas of a religious ritual. The scent is sharp, slightly sour, and deeply earthy. You taste it. It's like being hugged by the planet. Just when you think your digestive system might stage a coup, Dariush appears at your elbow. He carries a small clay pot wrapped in linen. You peer inside. It's abgusht, a slow-cooked meat and chickpea stew served with the liquid separated into its own bowl and the solids mashed into a paste. He hands you a spoon, a pestle, and a look that says, "You're one of us now." You mash, you stir, you taste. It's hearty, humble, and oddly nostalgic, even though your ancestors were more fish finger types. Quirky fact: abgusht was once considered a traveler's meal, easy to pack, rich in calories, and perfect for long journeys. It eventually became a picnic staple, often cooked in clay pots buried near embers and dug up at just the right moment. Ancient Tupperware, if you will. Somewhere to your left, a scholar in dusty robes is attempting to explain the culinary metaphor behind a roasted trout garnished with lotus petals. People nod solemnly. One person applauds. The trout says nothing. Your plate is now a chaotic mosaic of flavors, textures, and questionable architectural decisions. But it doesn't matter. Here, the goal isn't balance, it's blissful abundance. Every guest treats their dish like a still life in progress. A few younger nobles try to one-up each other with flavor pairings, daring each other to combine pickled garlic with sweet pilaf or dried yogurt with candied apricot. You try one of their concoctions. It tastes like regret and genius in equal measure. Dariush checks in again, this time offering a wedge of something wrapped in fig leaves. Inside, slow-roasted lamb shoulder, seasoned with dried lime, coriander, and black salt. The meat is so tender it doesn't fall apart. It politely drifts. You take a bite. A nearby raven pauses mid-caw, presumably out of respect. Historians still debate whether these meat recipes evolved from court traditions or nomadic campfire ingenuity. Some records mention elaborate field kitchens trailing behind Persian armies, where generals dined on roasted boar and spiced duck even in the midst of campaigns. Tactical feasting, if you will. The music swells again, this time led by a ney player who wanders among the diners, notes fluttering like birds over the foodscape. The rhythm slows, bellies are full, palates are dazed, conversation turns dreamy. And you, sated, slightly sticky, serenaded by flutes and spices, realize something very simple. This wasn't just a meal. It was a performance, and you got a front row seat. The moment the last bite of saffron-glazed lamb dissolves on your tongue, you lean back on your woven pillow, fully prepared to slip into a gentle food coma. But your fellow picnickers have other plans. Dessert has not even begun. And dessert, in the Persian Empire, is not a polite, quiet curtain call. It is a grand encore, a sugary spectacle, a full-blown, honey-drenched declaration that yes, you can have rosewater in everything, and yes, someone will monologue about it. The first tray arrives like an exotic offering to some sleepy deity. You, apparently. On it are delicate, translucent cubes of faluda, a chilled noodle dessert made from thin vermicelli mixed with semi-frozen syrup of sugar, rose water, and lime juice. It looks like something a moon princess would serve at a spa, but you spoon it into your mouth and discover it's tangy, sweet, and cooling enough to make your eyebrows relax. Historians still argue whether faluda originated in the city of Shiraz or was a hybrid inspired by earlier Mesopotamian cold treats. Some contend it was first made as a sort of accidental culinary experiment involving snow storage and impatient children. Others claim it was invented by palace chefs who wanted to impress a particularly hot-tempered queen. You don't care. It's delicious. And it's cold, which, after an hour basking under a Persian sun and 4 kinds of stew, is basically a religious experience. Next comes gaz, Persian nougat. Chewy, sweet, studded with pistachios, and infused with the milky sap of a desert plant, whose name, you're warned, is unpronounceable unless you've made peace with your uvula. A man nearby tries. He nearly swallows his tongue. You suck on a piece anyway. It clings to your molars like it's paying rent. But the flavor is nutty and flowery, like someone whispered the idea of a meadow into a piece of candy. Another tray is passed around, this one overflowing with bami, tiny fried pastries soaked in saffron syrup, shaped like miniature donuts that went through an architectural program. Crisp on the outside, soft inside, and sweet enough to make your teeth hum. You eat 3. You pretend it's 2. Someone pretends not to notice. A boy no older than 9 announces that the sheer berenj is ready. Rice pudding, thick and creamy, sprinkled with cinnamon and sometimes rose petals. He carries it like it's a royal baby. You take a spoonful. It's simple, comforting, and oddly emotional, like a warm hug from someone who smells like nutmeg. One guest suggests a game of Guess the Spice. A circle forms. Tiny spoons are handed out like dueling swords. You're blindfolded and fed tiny samples, some floral, some peppery, one suspiciously similar to potpourri. Someone guesses sunshine. Someone else says regret. Nobody wins, but everyone claps anyway. Meanwhile, on the far edge of the gathering, a few nobler guests are partaking in a more refined dessert. Candied fruit peel wrapped around crushed walnuts and mint, held together with date paste. It's precise, dainty, and, let's be honest, a little smug. You try one. It tastes like ambition and orange zest. A curly-haired merchant boasts about having imported cinnamon bark from India and dried mango from Sind. He speaks in a slow, reverent tone, as though these ingredients personally blessed him. He offers samples, and while his enthusiasm is a touch intense, the flavor is undeniably mesmerizing. There's something wonderful about people who get emotional over dried fruit. Quirky tidbit. Ancient Persian picnics sometimes included sugar sculptures. Yes, actual edible art, shaped into birds, flowers, and occasionally full battles between tiny candy soldiers. Children were known to sneak bites when no one was looking, only to be caught with telltale powdered noses. And then, like clockwork, come the kalampe. These date-filled pastries from the southeastern city of Kerman are buttery, soft, and adorned with pressed patterns made from carved wooden stamps. Some look like flowers, others like tiny constellations. You bite into one and get hit with cinnamon, cardamom, and a memory you didn't know you had. Historians still debate whether these cookies were first developed by nomads looking to store dates or by priests as offerings for solar festivals. One theory involves a sheep, a broken spice jar, and divine inspiration. Another suggests bored monks with too much butter. Either way, thank them. The sun is starting to lower now, casting everything in a warm amber glow. Even the pastries seem to shimmer. A few people begin packing away their trays. Others linger, holding their last bites like it's the final line of a poem they're not ready to recite. You sip a warm, sweet tea laced with rose petals and saffron threads. It's thick, nearly syrupy, and more comforting than a lullaby sung into a wool blanket. The tea has a hint of cardamom, and you learn that this specific blend is only served after dessert, never before. Why? No one agrees. Some say it seals the sweetness, others say it wards off bees. You accept both. Dariush reappears, looking just as fresh as when he arrived, which frankly seems unfair. He raises his tea in a toast. To the Empire, he says, and to the fools who think dessert is an afterthought. Everyone cheers. You do too. A breeze picks up, rustling the fig trees and the half-rolled rugs beneath your feet. Birds chirp lazily overhead. Someone begins to hum an old lullaby. And as your sugar-soaked brain begins to lull into a state of serene quiet, you realize that in ancient Persia, dessert wasn't just the end of the meal. It was the soft landing. You're beginning to think this entire empire might have been fueled purely by carbs, spices, and audacity. But just as you sink into your third post-dessert nap pose, arms arranged like decorative tassels, legs flung in the general direction of not my problem, a low hum of movement rouses you. It's not the end of the picnic, not by a long shot, because now comes the entertainment. Yes, apparently, after 3 hours of eating and sipping floral teas, the Persians decided what everyone needed next was interpretive flute solos, comedic poetry, and maybe a lion dance. Or at least a guy in a lion hat. The first to perform is a man who looks like his eyebrows have memorized battle strategies. He steps forward with a reed flute carved with tiny inscriptions and plays a slow, lilting melody. It's haunting at first, like the song a lonely well would sing if it had abandonment issues, but gradually it turns lighter, dancing into something playful. A nearby child tries to mimic the tune with a blade of grass. It sounds like a dying goose. The adults cheer anyway. Historians still argue whether Persian picnic music was more improvisational or structured. Some surviving instruments hint at formal training, while travelers' journals describe wandering minstrels who'd show up uninvited, play for figs, and leave before the critique circle could convene. Next comes the nakal, a traditional storyteller draped in layers of fabric that could probably double as a yurt in a strong wind. He launches into a tale from the Shahnameh, Persia's massive epic of kings, demons, and poorly timed prophecy dreams. He performs with gusto, voice booming, arms flailing, occasionally miming sword fights using only a walking stick and very questionable footwork. You squint. Is that a finger puppet on his pinky? Yes it is. A group of elders nearby cackle at every twist in the tale. You, meanwhile, catch yourself leaning in, half awake, lulled by the rhythm of the language. It's mesmerizing, even if the story involves a hero who fights a dragon by throwing yogurt in its eyes. Open debate time. Some scholars believe these picnic storytellers were the original keepers of oral history in the empire, more trusted than scribes. Others argue they were just the ancient equivalent of very dramatic uncles with a flair for embellishment. Either way, they shape memory in the open air, not dusty archives. A teen with calligraphy ink on her fingers performs a short comedic poem about two rival bakers who fall in love over burnt flatbread. The crowd roars. Someone yells, "Now that's how you end a war." The entertainment continues with soft drumming, hand claps, and a brief attempt at synchronized ribbon twirling by three elderly women who have clearly lost the choreography, but not the attitude. One of them points a ribbon at you like a spell and whispers, "Dance, stranger." You politely decline by pretending to choke on a raisin. The quirky highlight comes when a man in a fox fur hat brings out what he calls a laughing bowl. It's a metal dish that makes a weird wobbling sound when spun with water inside, like a goat giggling underwater. He claims it was a gift from a wise man in Sogdiana. More likely, it's just an ancient version of a party trick. But the sound has everyone in stitches. Even the noble guests, seated slightly apart, appear amused. One of them recites a delicate ghazal, a lyrical love poem, so quietly that you miss half of it, but the half you catch feels like a silk ribbon brushing against your thoughts. Something about the moon drinking tea with the mountains. Or maybe it was the other way around. A pair of jugglers appear. Not children, but grown men with solemn expressions. They juggle pomegranates in silence. One misses, and the fruit explodes on the grass like a tragicomic metaphor. The audience applauds wildly, unsure if it was intentional. Quirky tidbit. Persian picnics sometimes included a mock council, where a group of guests would pretend to hold an emergency royal meeting, assigning absurd roles like Minister of Slight Breezes or High Vizier of Pastry Affairs. The goal? Make each other laugh without breaking character. Losers had to recite tongue twisters with their mouths full of dried figs. Nearby, a makeshift stage has been assembled using rugs and borrowed picnic stools. A man with a beard so luxurious it should have its own royal title begins miming scenes from everyday life, sweeping, baking, pretending to chase imaginary goats. It's absurd. It's brilliant. You suspect he's an accountant by trade. Another storyteller emerges, this one more serious. He tells of a picnic interrupted by invaders, only for the guests to charm the raiders with food, converting them into dinner companions. Historians still debate whether this tale is allegorical or based on a true event during Darius War's reign. One camp says it illustrates the empire's famed diplomacy. Another insists it's just an old joke with legs. You start to notice that these performances aren't just light entertainment, they're memory-making. A portable cultural archive, the music, the poetry, the slapstick, all part of how Persians stitch joy into their daily lives. And in between the laughter and applause, there's silence. The kind of warm, shared silence where even the breeze seems to take a bow. You sip more tea, now gently infused with bergamot and mint, and realize you haven't looked at the sun's position in hours. A final act. An elderly woman sings a lullaby to a baby asleep on a rug, her voice soft as crushed silk. The song isn't meant for you, but you listen anyway. Something in the cadence settles deep in your chest. Maybe this was the real entertainment all along, reminders that even empires pause for quiet. A man near you sighs and says, "Ah, I haven't laughed like this since the apricot shortage." You don't know what that means. But you nod. You've just finished applauding a juggling act involving watermelons and regrettable physics when someone beside you whispers, "The games are next." You raise an eyebrow. Games? As in, running? After 5 rounds of lamb and 3 rice refills? But no, this isn't that kind of game. This is Persian leisure, where wit trumps brawn and no one breaks a sweat unless it's dramatically required for effect. The first game is a riddle duel. 2 participants, both smug in silk sashes, take turns delivering riddles, each more obscure than the last. One begins, "What walks without feet, drinks without lips, and lives without breath?" You're still chewing a pistachio when someone shouts, "The wind!" and receives a fig as a reward. You clap along, pretending you definitely weren't thinking some kind of snake. Persian riddling wasn't just a picnic pastime. It was considered a form of mental swordplay, especially popular among scholars and courtiers. Historians still argue whether riddles were used as genuine assessments of intelligence or just fancy ways to flirt without getting exiled. Next, a circle forms around what appears to be a spirited game of chogan, an ancient version of polo, except right now it's being played without horses, on foot, and with a slight disregard for where the goalposts are. You watch as 2 teams, equally confused, slap a leather ball with bent sticks while laughing hysterically. Every time someone scores, a musician plays a triumphant squawk on a goat horn trumpet. You try to imagine modern office parties this fun. Team building would look a lot better with apricot prizes and a slightly judgmental hawk circling overhead. Nearby, a group sits down to a storytelling relay. One person starts a tale, passes it along after 2 sentences, and the next has to continue without skipping a beat. The narrative quickly derails from a heroic prince rescuing a city to an enchanted bowl of soup that grants wishes, but only if the spoon is clean. You're captivated. The bowl eventually turns evil. A wise grandmother defeats it using sarcasm and cumin. Quirky tidbit alert. In some regions of the Persian Empire, guests played a game called Mirror Lies, where each person would compliment another using an exaggerated falsehood. Example, "Your beard has outwitted 7 philosophers." The goal was to keep a straight face and accept the compliment as if it were obviously true. It's like Twitter, but without the threat of digital ruin. At one picnic recorded in a traveler's diary, guests held a contest for the most creative food metaphor. "This rice," one woman said, "is a lullaby disguised as lunch." A nearby scribe reportedly cried, "That's it, I'm retiring." There's a brief round of a Persian board game that looks like chess's artistic cousin. It involves peacocks, astrologers, and a suspicious number of secret passage tiles. One elderly player taps her token twice, whispers divine strategy, and wins without explanation. Her opponent nods solemnly and hands her a sweetmeat. You try your hand at a simpler game, walnut knocking. It involves rolling your walnut to hit someone else's. It's fun until a hawk, yes, an actual trained hawk, swoops down and steals a contestant's walnut mid-roll. Everyone cheers. Apparently, that's a winning move. Historians debate whether falconry birds were participants or just atmospheric extras. Some inscriptions suggest noble families trained their birds to react during games, essentially making them feathered referees with talons. Then comes a slower game, poetry tagging. One person recites the last line of a well-known poem, and the next must begin theirs with the same word. It's elegant and strangely hypnotic. The rhymes spiral into meditations on wine, longing, the color of dusk, and, because someone can't resist, a poem entirely about trying to escape your responsibilities by pretending to be a tree. Laughter never breaks the rhythm. Next to the players, a small table has been set with hand-painted cards. You wander closer and realize they're playing an early form of fortune-telling, less about mystical power, more about hilariously vague life predictions. One woman pulls a card that reads, "Beware of donkeys near rivers." She nods gravely. It is true. They do bite. This game, known in some regions as Hafez Hazi, sometimes involved drawing verses from the works of famous poets and interpreting them as life advice. Scholars still debate whether it was ever taken seriously or simply a graceful excuse to quote poetry and eat more sugared almonds. Meanwhile, a group of children are playing tag, weaving between sleeping adults and scattered fruit bowls. Occasionally, they pause to pretend to be gazelles, leaping and snorting dramatically, before collapsing in giggles. An older boy offers to teach them how to play Desert Kings, a make-believe game involving pebbles, imaginary caravans, and asking very politely for imaginary taxes. Even games here are miniature stories. Someone hands you a leaf folded into a betting token. "Guess how many seeds are in this fig," they whisper. You guess 23. You are off by 40. Your punishment? Eat another fig. By now, the sun has mellowed to a soft golden murmur. The edge of the garden is glowing with late afternoon light. Games start to wind down, but not entirely. Someone starts juggling bread rolls again. Another guest attempts to reenact a game they saw in Egypt using stones and a lot of guesswork. No one really knows the rules, but no one cares. And that's the joy of it. These games aren't about winning. They're about laughing, sharing, inventing. Whether you're dueling in riddles or pretending to be a spoon-hating soup bowl, the point is to make each other feel like the world, even one ruled by emperors and taxes, is still full of silly delight. A man claps his hands once and says, "Time for the quiet game." Everyone groans. It's the one nobody wants to play. You stretch your legs, now sticky with grass and maybe a rogue pomegranate seed. You've lost track of who won what. But you're full. Not just with food, but with a sense that in this empire, leisure itself was treated with ceremony. As sacred as temples, as complex as treaties. You sit back. Another fig arrives. You do not resist. You're slouched in soft grass, trying to count how many bites it took you to finish that last honey-drenched pastry, somewhere between 3 and a mild blackout, when a hush settles over the crowd. It's time for the main event. Not a speech, not a dance, but a story. And not just any story, of course. This is Imperial Persia. Here, storytelling is both entertainment and high art, revered like science and practiced like warfare. The man approaching the central rug wears robes heavy with embroidery, and his voice, when he speaks, is so smooth it could put an espresso to sleep. He begins with the usual flourish, a tale older than the mountains and twice as stubborn. It's about a baker who loved a woman made entirely of saffron dreams. You blink. The opening sentence alone has done more for your serotonin levels than therapy. This isn't just a campfire yarn. It's part of a cultural legacy. In the Persian Empire, storytelling was considered a craft as intricate as miniature painting. And it wasn't just adults. Kids learned by listening, copying, and eventually trying to outdo their elders at family gatherings. The storyteller continues, voice slipping easily between characters. The baker, the skeptical grandmother, the rival baker who secretly moonlighted as a poet. His tone deepens for danger, lightens for romance, and somehow makes you believe that love could, in fact, smell like cardamom and slightly burnt flatbread. Historians still argue whether court storytellers held official positions, like scribes or advisors. Some suggest they doubled as informal news spreaders, weaving current events into mythological frameworks, so listeners got politics with a spoonful of metaphor. Others insist they were spiritual descendants of Zoroastrian firekeepers, guardians of moral flame, albeit with better punchlines. You chuckle as the tale takes a turn. The woman of saffron dreams melts during a heat wave, and the baker has to reimagine her using apricots and sheer optimism. It's absurd and weirdly touching. Meanwhile, around you, picnic goers settle deeper into their blankets. Some quietly hum along with the tale's rhythm. Others sip rosewater or nibble candied walnuts, their expressions the same kind of soft focus you see on people listening to rain hit a window. Then a child stands up and, with complete sincerity, announces they know a better ending. The storyteller pauses, arches an eyebrow, and steps back. The floor, or well, the grass, is theirs. The child proceeds to spin an alternate ending, where the baker discovers that his saffron wife was actually the goddess of flavor, sent to test his patience. She later promotes him to Celestial Spice Ambassador. There is polite applause and one over-enthusiastic gasp. Everyone loves it. You marvel at the inclusivity. Here, storytelling isn't just a performance, it's participatory. Even your own brain starts building endings of its own. What if the saffron woman left because she wanted to become a painter? What if the baker had to win her back with a bread that sings? The next story is a familiar one to locals, judging by the collective nodding. It's about a prince cursed to speak only in gardening metaphors. Every time he tries to explain himself, people misunderstand and plant something new. Eventually, his palace becomes the empire's first accidental botanical archive. Quirky tidbit: some Persian gardens were designed with specific stories in mind, an entire orchard representing a single parable. You'd walk a winding path and experience the tale through plants, colors, and the location of water features. That's right, landscape as narrative. Your backyard is now officially underwhelming. The story shifts again, this time into an adventure involving a shape-shifting goat, a bridge made of whispers, and a dessert so good it sparks a war. You feel yourself drifting, not because you're bored, but because the rhythm of the voice, the cooling breeze, the rustle of leaves, they all conspire to make your eyelids heavy. But before you fully nod off, the storyteller drops a line so beautifully strange it jolts you upright. He walked into the wind and came out wearing time. You whisper it to yourself, not because it makes sense, but because it feels like it should. Eventually, the storyteller bows. People murmur thanks, some in verse. The storyteller accepts with a flourish and casually begins eating grapes, as if he hadn't just transported an entire crowd into 5 different metaphysical crises. Nearby, a scribe scribbles down highlights. Not the full story, no. Just the moments that made people laugh or gasp or cry. Persian chroniclers often recorded emotional reactions to stories rather than the tales themselves. Scholars still debate whether these logs were meant for posterity or just fuel for gossip. A young woman steps forward now, lute in hand. She sings the next tale. Yes, sings it. Her voice is clear, her melody ancient. The story is one of longing, 2 stars, always circling, never meeting. It's elegant and heartbreakingly simple. A single tear rolls down the cheek of a nearby nobleman, who tries to disguise it by pretending to choke on a fig seed. You listen, body still, thoughts meandering, and it hits you. In a world without streaming services, without TikTok, without endless push notifications, this was the bingeable epic. Shared live, imperfect, shaped by wind and mood and whoever happened to cough in the background. The storyteller finishes her song. There's no applause, just a shared silence, deep and resonant, like everyone's breath synced up without meaning to. Then someone breaks the spell with a sneeze, and the picnic slowly resumes its chatter. But something lingers. The mood, the story echo, the feeling that somewhere inside you, a baker is still searching for his saffron love. You lie back. A cloud drifts across the sun like a closing curtain. And for a moment, you swear you can hear the voice again, whispering from the petals of a passing breeze. You wake, if wake is the right word, from that storytelling haze, blinking up at a sky now tinged with late afternoon gold. The sun has begun its gentle retreat behind the cypress trees, casting long, sleepy shadows across the picnic field. Everything has slowed. Even the breeze seems to yawn as it glides past. A commotion near the shaded side of the grove draws your attention. There, beneath a canopy of intricately knotted silk and linen, a group of women sit in a circle, entirely absorbed in something delicate and quietly powerful, the art of embroidery. But this isn't your grandma's cross-stitching. No live, laugh, love pillows here. Persian embroidery was practically an elite sport, an artistic language stitched into silk, linen, and camel hair. You creep closer, quietly of course, as befits your current sleepy fox energy, and you begin to catch glimpses of vibrant scenes coming to life in thread. There are mythic birds, feasts under moonlight, gardens that curl in fractal detail. And it's not just aesthetic. Each image carries meaning. A fish might represent luck or fertility. A pomegranate could hint at sensuality, or a subtle political statement, depending on how full it looks. Historians still argue whether certain motifs were used to signal rebellion during turbulent dynastic shifts, but no one can prove it. It's either coded dissent or very passionate fruit appreciation. What's fascinating isn't just the visual complexity, but the social function. These picnic embroideries aren't idle pastimes. They're collaborative storytelling, gossip sessions, and sometimes satire. You spot one cloth with a tiny stitched nobleman dramatically tripping over his own ego. Subtle, petty, gorgeous. You ease down near the circle and soon realize this textile talk is less about perfection and more about presence. A crooked stitch isn't a failure. It's a memory. A moment when someone laughed too hard or was distracted by a nearby goat drama. Yes, goat drama. You glance over and confirm. One particularly surly goat is attempting to liberate a fig tart by sheer persistence. The battle is valiant, but ultimately lost to a vigilant child armed with a firm, "No, Baman." Meanwhile, back at the embroidery circle, a young girl is being guided by her grandmother, threading, pulling, knotting. You can feel time stretch here, not in the boring way, but in the soft, pliable way of slow rituals passed down like lullabies. Quirky tidbit, some Persian noblewomen embroidered not just scenes, but scents. Certain threads were perfumed with rose oil or saffron, leaving the finished cloth with a lingering aroma. Imagine history not only seen and heard, but smelled. You sniff politely and catch a faint hint of cinnamon. Elsewhere, a small team of men, yes, men, are embroidering a banner together. It depicts a hunting scene, but the prey is suspiciously ambiguous. Is it a lion? A very angry cloud? Historians still debate whether these stylized banners were meant for military parades or just particularly aggressive family reunions. You watch their hands move, steady, rhythmic. There's a kind of hypnotic grace to it, like watching someone braid light. Each pull of the needle feels like a heartbeat, each knot a footstep into the past. Someone offers you a sample cloth, a beginner square with simple vine patterns and an oddly endearing lopsided horse. You smile. It's somehow perfect. You imagine trying it yourself and quickly realize you'd accidentally embroider something unintentional, like a duck doing taxes. Still, the appeal is there. There's peace and quiet focus. No rush, no notifications, just the gentle repetition of creation. It's like a form of meditation, but with needles. Over to one side, two friends are embroidering a shared cloth. One stitches the flowers, the other the thorns. It's an inside joke, apparently. You don't need to ask. This, you realize, is how stories become heirlooms. Not just told or written, but woven into fabric, into memory, into an old shawl someone keeps in a cedar chest for 60 years, still faintly scented with the picnic breeze. The sky continues its slow fade into amber. Shadows stretch like sleepy cats, and a few people begin folding their picnic blankets, only to immediately sit back down. Nobody's in a hurry. You've entered the golden zone, that peculiar perfect hour where everything is soft-edged and time forgets to tick. You lean back again and look at the cloth in your hand. It's nothing fancy, just a scrap with uneven thread, but somehow it feels like a souvenir. A stitch in time, as they say. Only this one's attached to figs, laughter, and a slightly judgmental goat. A gentle bell rings in the distance, signaling tea time. Because of course there's tea. You blink, then stretch lazily and make your way toward the inviting clink of porcelain and the unmistakable scent of cardamom. But the embroidery? You tuck that cloth in your sleeve, because some moments you carry with you. The sun hangs low now, like it's shyly retreating behind the distant Zagros Mountains, casting the world in that soft amber wash only twilight can bring. You shuffle toward the tea tent. Yes, tent, not table, because this is Persia, darling, and tea here is a full production. Think theater, but quieter, warmer, and with 73 kinds of sugar cubes. As you step inside, the scent of cardamom, rosewater, and black tea hits you like a weighted blanket made of steam. The tent is softly lit by lanterns that swing lazily from the gentle breeze, casting golden flickers over trays of tiny porcelain cups, each one painted with impossibly delicate scenes. Dancing deer, crescent moons, and, because humans can't help themselves, cats in turbans. You're ushered onto a cushion by a man who has clearly poured tea for emperors. He moves with the fluid grace of someone who takes his pour angle very seriously. He doesn't ask how you take your tea. He already knows. It's the kind of hospitality that's part ESP, part tradition. Welcome to one of the Persian Empire's most beloved traditions, the tea ceremony. Less rigid than its Japanese cousin, but every bit as symbolic. Here, tea is not just a beverage, it's diplomacy, therapy, entertainment, and occasionally matchmaking. Mainstream fact time, Persian tea culture dates back over 1,000 years, but it exploded in popularity during the Safavid and Qajar periods, when tea became not just a drink, but a national identity. Samovars imported from Russia were quickly adapted and perfected in design, and before long, every noble household had one, usually polished to a mirror shine and guarded with the fervor most people reserve for Fabergé eggs. You sip your tea, delicate but strong, like a good Persian poem, and watch as conversations ebb and flow around the tent. Here, someone's debating the latest verses of Hafez. There, two old men argue whether quince jam or sour cherry pairs better with the afternoon blend. Spoiler, it's cherry. The jam winks at you. A woman with an elaborate braid and even more elaborate earrings slides a silver dish toward you. Inside are sugar cubes. But not just any sugar cubes. These are infused with saffron and shaped like tiny camels. You can't explain why, but you feel very seen. Quirky tidbit, in traditional Persian etiquette, sugar cubes were once held in the mouth while tea was sipped through them. It's a technique equal parts delicious and slightly dangerous, depending on your molar strength. You decide to try it and immediately make a mental note to thank your dentist later. Historians still debate whether these elaborate tea picnics were more about actual tea or about orchestrated power displays. Because let's be honest, when a noblewoman shows up with hand-painted cups, a mint-scented sugar dome, and a leave oud player softly strumming in the background, she's not just thirsty. The tea tent is also where alliances were forged, both romantic and political. Someone pours another cup and leans in close. Not for secrets, but for stories. This is how histories are traded, one sip at a time. You listen as a tale is spun about a prince who once disguised himself as a merchant just to attend a picnic like this. He fell in love with a spice seller's daughter and gave up his title for her samovar. Historians aren't sure it's true, but you know what? Let them dream. Elsewhere, a child is using a sugar tongue like a puppet. Two elders pretend not to see. A young scribe is sketching the scene in a notebook, likely to become next week's gossip poem. You glance over and find your own cup has been refilled again, without you noticing. You lean back, warmth pooling in your stomach, heart slowing to a gentle thud, thud, thud. The sounds of spoons clinking and soft conversations mix with the occasional rustle of leaves outside. You could fall asleep right here, if not for the delicate performance about to begin. Because no Persian tea event would be complete without the storytelling session. A man stands near the center of the tent, balancing a cup on the edge of a slender wooden cane. He begins not with a dramatic proclamation, but with a sigh, as though the story's been waiting in his chest for far too long. His tale meanders like a lazy stream. There's a cunning fox, a jealous sultan, and an enchanted pomegranate that may or may not be cursed. The details are hazy. The point, as always, is in the rhythm, not the logic. A few guests chuckle at the punchlines. One older woman mutters that she's heard it before, but keeps listening anyway. And you? You sit there, your cup warm in your hand, your mind drifting between words and wishes, your breath syncing with the cadence of a centuries-old tale. It doesn't matter where the story ends. You're already where you need to be. You sip, you sigh, and for one blissfully still moment, you forget what century you're in. The storytelling winds down with a flourish involving a talking parrot, a misplaced wedding ring, and what may or may not have been a djinn disguised as a spice merchant. You're still not entirely sure. But the applause is gentle, the laughter is warm, and the air in the tea tent seems to thicken with comfort, like warm custard laced with nostalgia. You rise, slowly, limbs stretching like an old cat in sunlight. Outside, the moon has fully risen, silver and unbothered, casting shadows that seem to sway to a beat only ancient cypress trees can hear. The air has cooled just enough to raise goosebumps on your arms, but not enough to make you wish for a cloak. You follow a path lined with flickering oil lamps and the occasional curious hedgehog, drawn toward a soft, rhythmic sound. It's music. Not the lively kind from earlier, but something slower, more thoughtful. You round a bend and discover the final act of tonight's imperial picnic, the after-dinner musical salon. A sort of portable amphitheater draped in silk and dreams, where music isn't performed, it's summoned. You take a cushion near the edge, close enough to see the calluses on the musician's fingers, far enough that no one will ask you to clap on beat. The instrument of choice tonight is a santur, a trapezoidal hammered dulcimer that looks like a zither, fell in love with a harp, and decided to have 72 strings just to be dramatic. Mainstream historical fact: the santur is one of Persia's oldest instruments, with roots going back to ancient Mesopotamia. Its gentle, percussive tone made it a favorite at royal courts, and it was often the instrument of choice for twilight performances like this, when guests were full, mellow, and just sleepy enough to think they could still follow a melody. The musician begins, striking the strings with tiny felt-tipped mallets called mezrab. The notes fall like droplets of water into a still pond, each ripple stretching into the next. You exhale slowly, shoulders slumping into the fabric behind you. The music is neither happy nor sad. It's the sound of maybe, of memory, of feelings you once had at sunset but can't quite name anymore. Across from you, someone sways gently to the rhythm, eyes closed. Another guest has completely dozed off, snoring so softly it's almost part of the melody. No one minds. Falling asleep here is practically a badge of honor. Quirky tidbit: some picnickers, especially poets, believed that music under moonlight unlocked a part of the soul unreachable by daylight. This led to elaborate sound feasts, where musicians performed improvisational pieces based on guests' emotions. You'd simply describe how your day felt, and a master would compose a mini concerto to match your mood. Mildly disappointed, but open to surprises, was a particularly challenging genre. Tonight's performance leans contemplative, like the sound of time unfolding in reverse. The santur's gentle cascade is joined by a ney flute, whose breathy tones drift through the trees like a whisper trying not to wake the stars. You watch as the two musicians play without looking at each other, seemingly connected by some invisible thread spun from years of practice and a mutual respect for not rushing anything. Historians still argue whether these twilight salons were spontaneous or carefully choreographed. Some claim they were expressions of cultural freedom. Others think they were subtle showcases of elite taste and control, status disguised as leisure. One thing's clear: they weren't just entertainment. They were extensions of a worldview where beauty was both philosophy and diplomacy. The music pauses. You realize you've forgotten to blink. Someone offers you a dried fig soaked in rose water. You accept without speaking. Everything feels slower now, as though time itself has decided to sit cross-legged and listen for a while. And then, of course, there is dance. Not the exuberant kind from earlier, but something more intimate. A solo dancer appears in the clearing, clad in layers of gauzy silk that catch the moonlight like waves. They move not to impress, but to express. Their hands paint stories in the air, tales of longing, joy, loss, and dinner that came out just a bit too salty. You remember someone saying earlier that in Persian tradition, dance was often used not to entertain, but to communicate the unspeakable. Emotions too big or slippery for words found their home in motion. And right now, under this silver sky, you believe it. As the performance winds down, the audience offers no applause, only silence, the highest form of respect in a world where words are often too clumsy. A few guests quietly wipe away tears. One murmurs a line from Rumi under their breath. You forget it almost immediately, but the feeling stays with you. The music resumes briefly, one last wistful melody as a thank you and a goodnight kiss to the trees. You realize you're still holding your fig. It's delicious. Somewhere behind you, a servant relights a lantern. Somewhere in front of you, the dancer melts back into the shadows. You pull your cloak tighter, not out of cold, but as if trying to preserve the feeling wrapping itself around your ribs. The night is deep now. And you are weightless, rooted and floating all at once. You wander from the music tent with feet that seem to have forgotten how to walk fast. Everything now feels wrapped in silk. Your thoughts, your pace, even the distant croaking of a frog near the water basin. And yes, of course there's a frog. Persian picnics apparently included a full supporting cast of wildlife, all hitting their cues like trained extras. Somewhere behind a laurel hedge, a nightingale warbles softly, as if to remind you that poetry isn't just written, it's lived. You follow a winding path that seems designed to gently confuse your sense of direction. Left, then right, then past an arbor trellis dripping with flowering vines whose names you can't pronounce, but whose scent makes you think of childhood, even if you didn't grow up within 5,000 miles of a Persian orchard. Ahead, a soft light glows amber. You step through a curtain of gauze and find the dreaming tent. This, it turns out, is not a nap zone, though many succumb to that too, but a place for contemplation, for lounging, for spontaneous storytelling sessions led by someone old enough to have gray in their beard, but sharp enough to convince you that camels once flew, and not in a metaphorical way. This is where things get weird and lovely. Mainstream historical fact: dream tents, or quiet corners, were common in upper-class Persian gardens. They served as spaces for mystics, poets, and thinkers to gather informally. Philosophical debates, daydreaming contests, and the occasional game of Guess the Spice by Smell took place under these moonlit pavilions, surrounded by cushions, incense, and the deep quiet of a world that hasn't discovered email yet. Tonight, the storyteller is already mid-flow, weaving a tale about a baker's apprentice who invented an unbeatable chess strategy based on pie crust braiding techniques. Is any of this true? You don't care. Neither does anyone else. Someone hands you a steaming bowl of sweetened barley milk. You sip. It's thick, spiced, comforting, like drinking a memory of winter while wrapped in your grandmother's laughter. A cat you didn't see before hops onto your lap. It doesn't ask. It just is. Quirky tidbit. Elite Persian picnics were known to feature animals, cats, songbirds, even trained monkeys, that wandered freely among the guests. They weren't just decorative. Some were considered lucky. Others were thought to carry messages from the spirit world, and one monkey reportedly recited couplets from memory, though recited might be generous. Historians still argue whether it was trained mimicry or just impressive screeching. The storyteller shifts tone. The tent quiets. He describes a prince who fell in love with a cloud, followed it across deserts, and disappeared. People nod solemnly, as if this is a perfectly reasonable romantic plotline. You find yourself rooting for the cloud. The warm barley milk settles in your stomach like a lullaby. Someone nearby is humming, just a breath of tune, and it blends into the breeze in a way that feels intentional. You've forgotten what time it is. You've forgotten what time means. And then, because this picnic has layers, someone pulls out a small puppet theater. Yes, puppets. Tiny embroidered figures, operated by a duo of artisans who silently arrange them behind a backlit screen. The story? Something about a caravan leader who hires a camel that's actually a cursed prince who's allergic to almonds. It's part comedy, part moral lesson, part fever dream, and it has the entire tent giggling like sleep-deprived children. Historians still argue whether these puppet shows were performed for adults or children, or if the line was ever clearly drawn. Some sources suggest royal courts enjoyed surprisingly risque puppet tales. Others insist they were purely moral allegories. You suspect the truth is both, and also doesn't matter when the shadow camel makes a dramatic entrance with a sneeze. Outside the tent, a soft gong sounds. Not urgent, just suggestive. It's the unspoken cue that the evening is approaching its final descent. You rise, reluctantly. The cat sighs and slinks off. The storyteller waves his hand as if dismissing your character from the stage. You step into the cool night air, and suddenly, without any fanfare, it starts to snow. Not real snow, of course. This is Persia. What falls from the air is a gentle cascade of petals, shaken loose by a discreet servant from a canopy of overhead blossoms. But in the dim lamplight, it mimics snow so convincingly that several guests murmur soft oohs and extend their palms to catch the delicate flurry. And you? You just stand there, breathing, letting the petals settle in your hair and on your sleeves. Everything feels slower now. Even your heartbeat seems to take longer between beats. Someone whispers that this was the favorite moment of Darius the Great, that he would end his feasts with falling petals and silence, believing that true joy should exit quietly, on tiptoe. You believe it, even if it's not true, especially because it's not true. You don't speak, no one does. The petal snow continues, and somehow, impossibly, it's enough. You drift along a winding garden path lit by lanterns shaped like half-moons. At this point, you're not entirely convinced you're awake, or even in your own body. You could be a figment of someone else's dream, padding through soft grass with a half-full belly and a head full of shadow camels and flying pastries. But no, your sandal catches on a loose cobblestone. You're definitely still you, just a slower, slightly more poetic version of yourself. Ahead, the terrain changes. The scent of rosewater fades, replaced by the earthy aroma of clay, cumin, and something nutty. You've reached the artisan zone. Yes, the Persian picnic is also a craft fair, because naturally, what pairs better with pistachio pastries than a live demonstration of how to glaze a ceramic bowl while quoting 12th century poets? This section of the garden is dotted with low workstations, benches, and quiet clusters of onlookers watching artists at work, not performing, just being. Mainstream historical fact. Persian elite gatherings often included showcases of skilled craftsmanship. Metalworkers, calligraphers, woodcarvers, and miniature painters were sometimes invited not just to display their work, but to create it on site, transforming the picnic into a living museum. It wasn't performative labor, it was honor. Guests might commission custom items right then and there, often inscribed with personalized verses or symbols. You stop at a table where a woman is inlaying silver wire into a walnut wood box. Her fingers move like she's threading air itself. You watch, hypnotized, as spirals unfurl and loop, forming patterns older than the empire itself. Want your name in it? She murmurs without looking up. You blink. Just a symbol then, she says, already deciding for you. She begins to carve a tiny lion asleep under a cypress tree. You feel oddly seen. Quirky tidbit. Some high-ranking guests at these garden feasts would bring their own half-finished embroidery, sketches, or carvings to work on during the event, sort of an ancient version of a knit-and-sip night. One scribe even recorded a nobleman finishing a scroll of chicken marinade instructions mid-poem recital. You wander on, past a glass blower, exhaling glowing orbs into existence. Past a calligrapher delicately painting a line of Rumi across a stretched parchment that rustles like leaves. Past a boy balancing a tray of ink pots on his head while quoting Hafiz with dramatic hand gestures. Historians still argue whether these gatherings were truly inclusive of artisan voices, or if the presence of craftsmen was more symbolic than participatory. Some believe that craftspersons were honored as philosophers of form, while others argue they were invited for ambiance, more exhibit than peer. Regardless, it's clear these events celebrated the fusion of intellect and beauty, hands and minds moving together. Now you're at the tent of curiosities. No, not a circus sideshow. Think more Persian flea market curated by a whimsical librarian. Here, a scholar in a tea-stained robe invites you to handle, gently please, a selection of peculiar objects. A fossilized pomegranate seed, a curved bone flute believed to summon jackals, a vial of sand from a river that no longer exists, a sliver of obsidian etched with the world's shortest epic poem. He walked. She stayed. You don't question any of it. You're too far in. The scholar peers at you and asks, "Would you like to contribute something?" You reach into your sleeve, because of course you're wearing a sleeve with a mysterious inner pocket now, and you pull out a pebble. Just a plain, round pebble you'd picked up absent-mindedly hours ago. The scholar nods solemnly and adds it to the table. "Excellent weight," he says, suggests patience. Someone nearby hums a short tune on a reed flute. It's not particularly melodic, but it seems to complement the glow of the lanterns, the hiss of the distant kitchen fire, the pop of resin in a brazier. Everything feels orchestrated, but by someone with a very gentle hand. A group of children dart by, laughing. They're wearing masks, papier-mâché lions and peacocks, and one suspiciously convincing onion. A game of tag spills past you, and one child stops, stares up at you through enormous paper eyes, and declares, "You are the old mountain spirit." You bow gravely. "Yes," you say, "but only on weekends." The child giggles and runs off. You wander again. You find yourself beside a shallow pond, its surface mirroring the sky like polished silver. Floating candles drift lazily across it, each flame cradled by a lotus blossom. A servant walks past, tossing bits of saffron and dried marigold into the water with the same casual elegance most people reserve for flipping pancakes. A flute resumes. A breeze shifts the trees. Somewhere, a bird calls once, softly, as if to remind you that you're still listening. You're still here. You crouch beside the pond. Your reflection doesn't look back. It seems to be facing a slightly different direction. You wave. It doesn't. You laugh. And that, too, feels like part of the show. By now, your sandals have given up trying to stay clean, your robe smells faintly of roasted quince and sandalwood smoke, and your sense of time has gone full squiggly. It could be midnight or early afternoon. Honestly, the sun could rise wearing a turban and you wouldn't even blink. You follow the subtle current of bodies drifting toward the far end of the garden, an unspoken migration toward the final act. Not grand or theatrical, no trumpets, just a slowing, a hush, as though the evening itself is beginning to fold its limbs and lie down beside you. You arrive at what looks like a modest pavilion. Nothing flashy, low arches, faintly embroidered awnings, and mats arranged in a sunburst pattern around a small fire pit. But what it houses is the heart of the Persian twilight, the storytelling circle. Mainstream historical fact. Persian nobility cherished the oral tradition of storytelling as an essential part of social gatherings. Professional storytellers, known as naqals, were often invited to recite epic poetry, fables, or satirical tales. These tales weren't just for entertainment. They reinforced cultural values, taught history, and even offered sly political commentary if you listened closely enough. Hint, the talking camel isn't just a camel. You find a spot near the edge, settling onto a cushion that seems to mold itself to your shape like it was waiting for you. The fire crackles once, as if clearing its throat. The naqal appears, not with a dramatic entrance, but just is suddenly there, draped in a cloak stitched with tiny bronze mirrors that catch the firelight like stars in a lazy galaxy. He starts without preamble. Once upon a carpet. In the time of wise dogs and foolish kings, when dates fell from trees fully stuffed with almonds, and just like that, you're gone again. Quirky tidbit. Some Persian storytellers use subtle props, like painted pebbles or folding fans, to represent characters or shifts in the tale. One famous naqal in Shiraz used a chicken feather to indicate whether the story was being told as truth, dream, or jest. The feather never lied. Tonight's story is about a man who tries to measure the wind, not metaphorically, literally. He builds contraptions, chases breezes with jars, courts mountain peaks, and finally ends up arguing with a very smug cloud. Spoiler, he never captures the wind, but he does accidentally invent the concept of leisure. You laugh, quietly but genuinely. So do the others. Even the fire seems to lean forward when the naqal reaches the climax, when the wind itself replies in verse. Historians still argue whether naqals were more respected than poets or vice versa. Both could receive lavish patronage, and both walked the precarious line between entertainer and philosopher. Some even doubled as informants or mediators in royal courts. But what's certain is that storytelling, especially at night, especially in gardens, was more than a tradition. It was medicine. This one features a young girl who befriends a talking pomegranate seed and learns the true name of every bird in the sky. At least 3 of the birds have debts in the spice trade, and one is aggressively allergic to cinnamon. The plot's a bit wobbly, but your brain doesn't mind. It's riding the rhythm now, not the logic. Someone passes around cups of warm milk spiced with cardamom and honey. You accept yours with 2 hands. It's absurdly good, the kind of drink that hugs your bones. You sip, and the storyteller's voice wraps around you again like a well-worn scarf. Next tale, a prince who tries to host a picnic in the desert and discovers that all his servants are secretly poets. He starves, but the metaphors are unforgettable. Callback time. Remember that lion asleep under the cypress tree from the artisan section? He's back. In this story, he's a recurring character who offers cryptic advice like trust a fox with opinions on architecture, and the moon only sings for bakers. You nod sagely. That tracks. The fire dwindles. Not out, but lower, gentler. The storyteller ends with a phrase that doesn't feel like an ending. And so the mountain yawned and became a dream. Then he nods once, and the mirrors on his cloak blink softly before going still. The guests stir, not to leave, but to shift. A few lie down right where they are, using their robes as blankets. Some wander off in pairs, speaking in hushed tones that sound like wind through poppies. You stay a while longer, finishing your milk, watching the flames flicker like sleepy eyes. The storyteller vanishes again, just like before. There one moment, then only a trail of mirror flashes and a scent like cedar bark. You walk slowly now, no rush, nothing left to chase. Somewhere behind the garden walls, a faint drumbeat suggests someone is still dancing. Somewhere else, a harp plucks the beginning of a lullaby that no one has sung for centuries. But for you, the picnic is nearly over. One more path to follow, one more soft crunch of gravel underfoot, one more curious turn before sleep finds you completely. You reach the final stretch of the garden, where the air feels a little cooler and the lights fewer. Not extinguished, just quieter, like the stars are now speaking in whispers rather than winks. The scent has shifted too, from roasted meats and sun-warmed herbs to something sleepier, lavender maybe, or the lingering breath of incense twirled into the breeze. It's here that the last ritual of a Persian noble picnic unfolds, the digestive. Or rather, the sit still and reflect so your stomach doesn't revolt phase, cloaked in ceremony. You're ushered into a circular seating area lined with cushions so pillowy they practically sigh when touched. Small oil lamps flicker gently along the edges, casting shapes on the walls that look suspiciously like sleepy cats or smug owls. A servant appears, silent and barefoot, with a tray of drinks. Not alcohol, not this late. Instead, it's sharbat, a chilled, syrupy infusion made from sour cherries, rose petals, or sweet basil, diluted in snow scraped from distant mountaintops. You take one. It tastes like a song you half remember from childhood. Cool, sweet, and slightly magical. Mainstream historical fact, Persian sharbat traditions date back thousands of years. These flavored beverages were not only status symbols, but also seen as medicinal tonics, tailored with herbs and fruits to aid digestion, soothe nerves, or as tonight's theme would suggest, ease one gently towards sleep. Ice was transported from mountain ice houses called yakchals, ancient Persian refrigerators made of mud brick and clever engineering. That snow in your cup might be older than your current hairstyle. Around you, the conversation has dwindled to soft chuckles and half-finished thoughts. This is the winding down space, the postscript of the picnic. Some noble guests engage in gentle games, flicking pebbles across intricately patterned cloths, betting tokens carved from bone or semi-precious stone. Others light long, narrow pipes of spiced tobacco, the smoke curling upward like silk scarves tossed in slow motion. Quirky tidbit, in some Persian picnics, it was customary to release caged songbirds at the end of the night as a symbol of freedom and gratitude to nature. The idea was that beauty must always be returned to the world after borrowing it for a while. Occasionally, someone forgot to unlatch the cage. Cue an awkward silence, and then more sharbat. And as you lie back, eyes half-lidded, belly full, feet dusty, mind thoroughly marinated in poetry, perfume, and plum syrup, you begin to notice something strange. No one is really leaving. Not in a rush, not with farewells or elaborate thank yous. The end of the picnic simply arrives, like dew or fog. One guest curls up near the lamp. Another leans into their traveling companion, robes pulled tight. You're not even sure if you're supposed to be sleeping here. But honestly, who's going to stop you? The cushions have committed to you. The lamp nearby flickers exactly once, then glows softer, like it knows. Historians still argue whether these overnight picnic traditions were universal or reserved only for elites. Some believe traveling performers and merchants were often invited to stay through dawn, especially if their stories or talents had pleased the host. Others suggest that extended picnics were a form of social signaling, an unspoken message that your estate was not just hospitable, but worthy of lingering in. Whatever the truth, one thing's certain, you're not walking home tonight. Not when the sky looks like black silk sewn with sparks, not when your bones hum with warm cumin and honey, not when a moth dances over your cup like it's delivering a bedtime wish. Somewhere close by, a musician plucks a final note on a harp made of bone and bronze. You feel the vibration even though you don't hear it. A final servant passes with a bowl of water scented with mint and lemon. You dip your fingers in. The chill reminds you of distant snow, of mountain winds, of the fact that even in the warmest garden, the cool will come. Your last thought before giving in to sleep? That the Persians didn't invent the picnic. They perfected it. And perhaps, if you listen closely to the quiet between dreams, you might still hear the whisper of that lion's advice. Rest well, but never trust a fox who says he's just here for the grapes. Now, as your breath slows and your thoughts begin to blur like ink in water, the wind down begins. Wind down. You're still there, on that cushion. The fire behind your eyelids flickers soft gold. The scents of rosewater and saffron have become part of your own breathing now. Familiar, almost familial. Your body feels warm and just heavy enough, like a blanket draped over itself. The sounds around you have faded, but not vanished. Somewhere a gentle breeze stirs the trees. Leaves rustle like pages turning in a book you don't need to finish. The garden's laughter has faded into something quieter, like distant waves or a lullaby hummed by the earth itself. Let go now. There's no more narrative, no more clever punchlines or scholarly debates. Just this gentle twilight, soft and circular, like a rug unrolled across time. The cypress trees you passed earlier are now just silhouettes, tall and kind, standing watch as your thoughts slow to a dream's pace. Every step you took today feels far away now, like a painting you once stepped inside. Even the storyteller's cloak of mirrors is folded somewhere safe, catching moonlight instead of fire. You did well, traveler of stories. You tasted, listened, wandered, and wondered. That's all that was ever asked of you. Now there is only softness, the ground beneath you, the breath beside you, the hush all around you. Sleep is here, and the Persian garden waits, not to be remembered, but to be returned to, when next you close your eyes. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.